Hello and welcome to the Cinementalist podcast for cinementalist.com. Sitting across from me is Liam, looking very happy indeed, and sitting next to me is Floki, our bearded dragon mascot. How's it going, matey?
Yeah, not too bad at all, thanks, man. You?
Yeah, all good, man, all good.
Goody gumdrops.
Excellent. We have the rarest of things this week. I'm going to start out with a shout out because this week we got our 666th Twitter follower.
Oh, damn.
I know, right? Number of the beast and all that. And I've got some pertinent stuff on that later as well, which should be fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah, excellent. It's the Satan episode. Hooray. This is a shout out to his Twitter name is Nai Nosbinori or Nai Nosbinor. Nai Nosbinor, that's the one. Yeah. Although his screen name is Ian. So,
Ian.
Yeah. He's from the north of England and he's a metalhead as well, which is pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah.
Not just for the 666 Association, but a little bit of behind the scenes. We always start off with a half an hour warm up where we sit around and we listen to metal just continuously.
We certainly do, yeah. Metalheads are usually pretty cool.
Sort of gets you pumped up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine there might be some people who sit around doing it with Barry Manilow, but I wouldn't be able to get pumped up to that.
I don't
personally.
think that'd amp us up to perform for the podcast. Yeah, we've always been like metalheads and rockers,
Well, yeah, just I think, things that we have always gravitated towards in terms of entertainment, it's, there's sort of high energy. There's a desire for being amped and having, a certain electricity.
Yeah, I like
there,
to think
isn't there?
so, yeah.
And Donovan isn't really going to do that, unfortunately. No offense to any fans.
I don't know. Yeah, for some people, maybe Donovan does it, but not for us. Anyway.
Horses for courses.
Horses for courses and all that shite. Okay, well, it's time for some film news then. And I really had to work hard this week because there is precisely fuck all going on in the film industry at the moment.
Dry season, eh?
It really is, yeah. I really had to scrape around a bit for these. So I do apologise, but hopefully there's some good stuff in there. Anyway, there is a new Guy Ritchie film that's out at the moment.
Just the one with Stave.
It's with the Stave. Yeah.
Something Man.
Yes. Well, so I've got this article here from Empire. And I'll just read you the article. Right at the start of his career, Jason Statham made his movie debut in the films of Guy Ritchie. His first feature was Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. He followed up with Snatch. But for his next role, the actor has teamed up with Ritchie again in Wrath of Man.
It's a remake of a French film, isn't it?
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't really know anything about this until I saw the
Yeah, I
article
think
today.
was reading like the original French heist thriller. I believe it's called Cash Truck, something like that, which is very on the nose, but why not?
Oh, yeah, it's a crime thriller set in the world of armoured cash trucks and marks his first Ritchie movie, as in Jason Statham's, since 2005. Revolver was the last thing we did, Ritchie tells Empire in the new issue. I wonder why. God, I hated that film.
Well, it's just silly. It's very silly. This thing, I love very strange, cerebral, art house cinematic offerings, but when something is as glowingly pretentious as Revolver, it really is a fucking slog.
Sometimes when I watch a film when it comes out and I think it's terrible, I'll catch it later. Like we'll be on at 1 o'clock in the morning or something when I'm flicking through the channels, trying to find something to turn my brain off before I go to sleep. Sometimes you come across them and you think, you know what? I'm going to give it another go. I'm going to watch it again and see if I've changed my mind, see if I can see some more merit in it. Honestly, to make me watch Revolver again, you would have to torture me.
Well, it commodes. How did he summarise the script? It's like some really up his own arse psychology graduate just scrawling his stream of consciousness bollocks on the back cover of NME or something like that.
I couldn't tell what the plot was. There's no through line in the narrative. It's all a bunch of pseudoscientific colour shift
the
theory.
last place you would look for your enemy.
Yeah, and all that shit. Anyway, Revolver kind of killed the Guy Ritchie, Jason Statham partnership. However, there is this new film. Statham is playing H, a cash truck driver with a mysterious past and who's not to be crossed lightly. Our relationship is identical to what it was the first time I worked with him, says Ritchie. All these years on from his 98 debut, we're still playing a lot of chess. Good for them.
Yeah. Sounds wild, man.
Yeah. And, I love the little bit of, character flair there. H. Is there another one that's going to be called R and another one that's called D?
Well, it's better with rock and roller, like 1, 2 and 2 Bob. And
yes.
It wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know how much is given away in what you're reading, but as far as I understand,
virtually nothing, I can tell you that.
As far as I understand it, Wrath of Man is quite serious-minded and humorless.
Oh, well, that's going to work well for Guy Ritchie, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that
He's always been very good at that.
that would be an apt description for Revolver as well. Because when you look at Lock, Stock and Snatch, it's obviously cheeky, chappy, very tongue-in-cheek.
The only things he's ever been good at, really, is humour-based stuff. Like King Arthur was pretty humorless, and look at that.
In terms of Guy Ritchie's filmography, I think the last film of his, in between Snatch and now, the only one that I've heard people banging on about as much as Snatch is The Gentleman. You know, as in...
Yeah, I quite liked it, to be fair. It had the Guy Ritchie humour thing. It didn't take itself too seriously. It's got a bizarre Hugh Grant performance in it, where he's doing, I think I said in my review, he's doing an impression of Bruce Forsyth. And to see that alone is worth the price of entry. And that rarest of things as well, Charlie Hunnam is actually very, very good in that. So yeah, it wasn't a bad film.
Well, he was, as I mentioned a little while ago, I was actually shocked by Charlie Hunnam in Jungle Land because I thought he turned in a really good performance in that.
He does seem to have matured into quite a good actor. Just stay away from the accents, I suppose.
Yeah.
Another news article here. This is from Variety. Bong Joon-ho, the director of last year's Oscar-winning Parasite, has announced that he is working on a Korean animated film about humans and deep-water sea creatures. He's been working on the screenplay with Korean company Fourth Creative Party since 2018. Bong is also at work on the script for an English-language film, which is understood to be set between the UK and the US. The Yonhap news agency reported the English-language film would likely be Bong's next directing effort. He's also going to be the judge at the Venice Film Festival this year. He's got a busy year lined up, does old Bong Joon. And another little bit here, Bong, who is also understood to be working on plans for a Parasite TV series at HBO, is additionally set as producer of the immigrant drama Sea Fog at Participant Media. Matt Palmer, who directed Caliber, is writing and directing Sea Fog based on a previous draft by Oren Moverman. The film is based on the 2014 Korean film Hai Mu, which follows a fishing boat crew on a dangerous commission to smuggle a group of undocumented immigrants from China to Korea. That film was directed by Shim Sung-bo and written by Bong and Shim. Their film, inspired by a true story, was in turn adapted from a 2007 stage play. There were a lot of names in there I had to get through.
Oh, the thing about Bong Joon-ho, do you know that he wakes up at 5 a.m. every day and immediately sticks a film on?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's the standard. You have to do that if you want to call yourself a cinephile.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've watched some pretty gnarly stuff in the morning. Didn't you say the other week that you watched I Saw the Devil first thing?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the sign of a true film nut right there.
And that was reasonably early.
Even I have to. I don't consider myself the same caliber of film nut as you, but I have to rev myself up for a film like that.
Well, thank you for the praise. I mean, I won't self-remark in that regard necessarily, but one thing I have been doing in the past few years, instead of sort of when I have a day off the next day, instead of staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning, getting completely mashed and listening to tunes, I like to fall asleep quite early now so I can get up at about 5 or 6 a.m. And the first thing I do is go for some sort of entertainment media.
Really? So you've gone around the other way? I've always known you as a late night person, very much like myself.
Yes, I mean, I still, I'm not always very, very early doors. Typically, I make myself suffer when it's a school night because I'm just a glutton for punishment. When I don't have to do anything the next day, I like to...
I should explain as well, I mean, you can probably guess from Liam's voice as well, school night where we're from means work in the morning.
Yep.
It's before someone thinks you're a spotty teenager.
Yep.
Another bit of film news here. This is actually interesting because we absolutely loved Knives Out. And Knives Out 2 is in pre-production at the moment. It's set to begin filming in, summer this year. Following Rian Johnson's fun and star-studded Knives Out in 2019, Johnson himself is set to write, direct, and produce the sequel, which will soon get its own separate title. The film will see Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc return to solve a new mystery with entirely new cast of characters to contend with. And of course, it's been funded by Netflix this time round, which was a huge deal. The original Knives Out grossed $311 million worldwide and was a not-so-surprising hit with its clever script and cast. However, we are getting some news in now as to who's being cast in the sequel. Have you seen any of this?
Isn't Batista in the sequel?
Yeah, so far, Dave Bautista and Edward Norton as well.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I really, really love Edward Norton. I think he's a fabulous actor.
Do you know the thing with Batista, I've been thinking about him recently because his roles in Blade Runner 2049, and there was one, is it Bushwick? I think it's pronounced Bushwick, which is like a suburb of, I believe it's either New York or New Jersey. Please forgive me, anyone listening who's a denizen of either of those. I cannot immediately recall. But his performances in both of those films, they've been rattling around recently. And I've been thinking, do you know what? They weren't actually that bad at all.
He's pretty good.
He's
yeah.
not. He's got some chops on him, Batista.
Mm.
I think he could. If he sticks with a sort of film career, I think that he could. He does have some. He's not like a monotonous Hulk.
To my mind, he does the best performances in the Guardians of the Galaxy films as well, which I liked very much. But I'm not particularly big on Chris Pratt. I think he's got one gimmick and that he reuses over and over again.
Would you say that his surname is appropriate?
Yeah, well, yeah. Another nice bit of British slang.
Don't know how mean we want to get here, but.
Yeah, no, I've never really. I quite liked him initially. I don't think he's bad necessarily, but he's one of those actors. I think that he's got one shtick, and I've seen that shtick now, and I've yet to see.
You like him in Parks and Rec, though, don't you?
Yeah, it's like in Parks and Rec. The thing I've actually liked him best in was Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh yeah.
I thought he did a really, really good job of that. It's not about film, Passengers. I mean, it's not one of those ones you go and rant and rave about, but it was much, much better than I was expecting it to be, and his performance in that is actually quite nuanced. So I mean, he does appear to have something else in him. Anyway, as you were saying, Dave Bautista as I believe it's Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, isn't it? Sort of steals the show, really. And it's quite a difficult role to play because he's playing this emotionalist, big, tough guy, but he's got most of the funny lines. But he's got no sense of humor, so he has to play everything. He has to be the straight man in the joke, and that's quite hard to do. That's not as easy as everyone thinks it is.
Pro wrestling's Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah, Dave Bautista actually manages to pull it off. So yeah, I'll be very interested to see what he does with Knives Out 2. Anyway, filming for it is beginning in Greece in June. So the assumption here is that Benoit Blanc is very much like Poirot used to, off on his holidays. So yeah, I'll be really, really interested to see that one. I have high hopes.
But if Knives Out 2 can pull off what the inaugural film did, just in terms
or even come somewhere near it, I'd be happy with.
If it manages to pull off the same kind of clever and labyrinthine twists and maintain that good humour, just that comprehensive level of sharpness. I don't want to doubt it. I'm not doubting. I'm just thinking I will be fucking impressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really got my fingers crossed that that's going to turn into this big series of films. And normally we're quite down on franchise films. Like do it once, do it well, maybe do a sequel and then forget it from that point. I would really like to see the Benoit Blanc sort of, the franchise, the continuation of. If we get one of those every 2 or 3 years, I'll be a happy man indeed.
And if they all hit the notes, then that would be something grand indeed.
Yeah.
One to look forward to.
I hope he's got another clever script in him. I've got a funny feeling he might. And last bit of news here. Acting legend Robert De Niro has signed on to star alongside comic and actor Sebastian Maniscalco in About My Father, a Lionsgate comedy loosely based on the life of Maniscalco. Heard anything about this?
I can't say I have, actually.
The 2-time Oscar-winning actor will portray Salvo, the father of Sebastian, in the film. In the movie, when Sebastian tells his old-school Italian immigrant father that he's going to propose to his all-American girlfriend, Salvo insists on crashing a weekend with her parents. Though their cultures clash and it seems that the two families have nothing in common, by the end of the weekend, they will be a family.
It's comedy, is it?
One would assume, if it's based on the real life of a comic, so you presume there's a lot of comic moments in there. But De Niro, as we've mentioned many times, has not been particularly good at picking comedy scripts.
No, well, I was actually quite pleased to learn when we eventually get around to seeing it that because De Niro is going to be the main villain in Killers of the Flower Moon. He's playing William Hale, who was the mastermind behind all
that is an interesting bit of news, and I don't have it here. Well done on that one.
So, De Niro is going to be the antagonist in a Scorsese picture. I am hoping that this will be an instance where he showcases the flourish that made him a household name in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't believe it's totally dissipated by any stretch.
Well, if you believe some of the gossip stuff, and I've thought about putting it in the news in the podcast, and I haven't really, because a lot of it seems quite spurious to me, but there is that constant discussion about, it's one of those rolling things. We've done it on the podcast. Loads of people have discussed it and written articles about it. What the hell happened to Robert De Niro? Why is he making so many crappy films? And the sort of scuttlebutt, if you like, on that one. I've always wanted to use the word scuttlebutt correctly. Is that his alimony proceedings with his wife have gone, and now ex-wife have gone very, very badly indeed. And he now has to take on all these projects to prevent himself from going bankrupt, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, given that he was complaining in 2020 that he only was going to make $3 million that year. I mean, what must your overheads be for $3 million a year not to cover it? But supposedly that is the reasoning for it's not him creatively losing his touch. It's simply he's taking every role that comes at him because he needs the money, which is a hell of a thing to find yourself
Nicolas
in.
Cage syndrome.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Cage, you can kind of get it because Cage is mad. And he bought a bunch of castles, which is
He is mad. Yeah,
And Johnny Depp as well bought an island and all this other bullshit. But
he's also pretty mad.
De Niro sort of invested in restaurants and things, and what a terrible thing to happen to an amazing actor right at the end of your career, if that really is the case, that your finances just go down the tubes. But anyway, I mean, this actually does seem like it may have. I mean, I know it's a very brief synopsis, but that does seem a little bit more interesting than bad grandpa, crazy grandpa, dirty grandpa, grandpa shoves fireworks up his bum, whatever the most recent bad De Niro idea is.
Or him and Pacino in Righteous Kill, whatever happened there.
Yeah. Well, would like to see that late-term resurgence. Wouldn't that be great?
It would be lovely, yeah. Fingers crossed, as always.
Okie dokie then. Well, that finishes the relatively brief news segment this week. Like I said, not a lot going on in the world of film at the moment. Hopefully by next week there'll be some good stories.
It's not our fault.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, what do you expect? If in doubt, berate the audience for their expectations.
Absolutely.
Liam, as usual, has a couple of film reviews. Kick us off, Liam. What have we got this week?
So, new release on Netflix. This is Things Heard and Seen.
Yes, I saw this go by my Netflix feed.
Yes, this is set in 1980 and it stars Amanda Seyfried as Catherine Clare. Catherine is an art restorer who lives in Manhattan with her husband, George, played by James Norton, who is a art lecturer, and they scoop up their little daughter Franny and they move to upstate New York because George has gotten a job offer at a prestigious university there as an arts lecturer. And they move into this new house, and almost immediately Catherine senses weird presences in forms of unnatural looking lights and a ghostly kind of presence and shadows over in the corner. But when she looks, there's nothing really there, and strange noises. And this coincides with George and a superior of his at work, played by F. Murray Abraham, who I'm a massive fan of, discussing the world of art critique and certain individuals who kind of treated art as a conduit for further discussion about the other realms and the afterlife and the spirit world and all of this seance-y mumbo-jumbo.
So is this people trapped in paintings or?
Not exactly, no. But paintings are a running motif. They're sort of like a supernatural motif in the film.
Okay.
And they're incorporated a lot into the imagery surrounding events. But Catherine gets repeatedly spooked by what she perceives to be a ghostly presence in the house. And she hires a couple of kids named Eddie and Cole, they're brothers, and they used to live in the house. And their history with the house is it's coloured in darkness. Their family used to live there, but some unspeakable, horribly violent tragedy happened. And they come to Catherine offering to essentially be farmhand, to do yard work, keep the place tidy, without letting her know precisely who they are. So they want to sort of do a good term, but they also have a vague attachment to the home that is elucidated. So they want to be there to be watchful. As George gets cozy in his new university position, we start to discern how he's not a particularly good or faithful husband. He starts to be very, very inappropriate with a lot of the local women, and he's just generally a very narcissistic and unpleasant personality. And he invites F. Murray Abraham over to dinner one night, and F. Murray Abraham takes Amanda Seyfried aside, and he's like, "Oh, you detect a presence in this house. I'm aware of it as well," and offers to hold a seance for her with some other people who are like-minded. And so basically it's a haunted house mystery with all of this focal female protagonist worried if her husband is a lot nastier of a man than he presents himself, and what these allegedly ghostly happenings around the home have to do with him, and it's a haunted house chiller with some unsettling domestic strife thrown in. So right off the bat, and I thought this as I watched it, and I've noticed a lot of critics have drawn very appropriate parallels. Do you remember Robert Zemeckis with What Lies Beneath with Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of the same thing going on here. Woman's at home alone. There's some freaky shit going on. Her husband isn't really the person she thinks she is. and there's a mystery lying at the heart of it where ghostly presences aren't necessarily as antagonistic as they might appear, or are they? It's very much that formula. So what can we say about Things Heard and Seen? Well, it is flat as fuck. Every single thing, as I mentioned, F. Murray Abraham, I love F. Murray Abraham. I thought he was the bollocks in Amadeus, Scarface, even An Innocent Man with Tom Selleck. I've always loved Abraham.
On paper, I mean, the cast sounds great.
Yeah, The Name of the Rose, he was marvellous as a Grand Inquisitor. I've always loved him. He is completely and utterly wasted in this film. With there, at no point when you're watching anyone do you forget that you are watching actors attempting to execute a role. There is nothing vicariously thrilling or enthralling, submerging, whatever about this film. All of the performances are one note. The dialogue is one note. None of the scenes of suspense or the special effects are effective in any way whatsoever. I didn't jump once. I didn't feel my nerves jangle once. As the character of George, the sort of villainous quotient of his personality began to accelerate, it felt very, very easy to predict. The plot developments in the third act are completely and utterly fucking absurd, to the point that I genuinely, hand on heart, did start laughing. And just a horrendously risible waste of time. There is nothing I can recommend about it. Positively nothing.
Yeah, this doesn't surprise me because I have seen, although I haven't watched the film itself, I have seen quite a lot of critic backlash coming through my news feed about it. This does seem to be the consensus that I've seen a lot of 5 out of 10s, literally a middle score. It is a film.
Yeah, yes, this is a film. Was it someone on Twitter? Was it like, this is most certainly a film. It does exist. It has cinematography and human beings detectable within the frame. Amanda Seyfried. I've liked Amanda Seyfried. I can think of one thing off the top of my head. I enjoyed Mean Girls by Tina Fey. I thought that was a very enjoyable high school satire, and Amanda Seyfried turned in a wonderful performance as a sort of lovable dunce. But here she is. This is something you could have gotten anyone to do. It is completely cardboard, flat, monotonous, delivering lines to the camera with no actual reaction, no organic reaction. James Norton as George his character is essentially smug, and he does that in a very pedestrian manner. I suppose he's elevated to this man is more unlikable than everyone else, who aren't particularly likable in the first place, even though you're supposed to be rooting for them. It's that jobby. It's an out and out 10 out of 10 failure. I've been racking my brains about, as I always do, this such and such wasn't actually that bad at all. Nah. Things Heard and Seen is an unmitigated pile of rubbish. And if you like thrillers, mysteries, horrors, just stay the fuck away from it, please, because it's a horrible waste of time. Really.
What about some recommendations? So if you are into the sort of haunted house, not necessarily the paintings thing, but off the top of your head, what should people be watching instead?
Well, what should they be watching if they enjoy things where, like, a fucked up abode is... I
don't think we've ever done like a haunted house special or anything like that.
Well, I mean, it's a hotel, but I think The Shining qualifies. Haunting of Hill House. The series by Mike Flanagan is definitely a good one. The Changeling with George C. Scott is good. Burnt Offerings with Oliver Reed. It's a little bit hammy by today's standards, but it's quite cool. Fucking hell, man! Episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? I would rather watch them. That may be a bit of a nostalgia kicking in there, but even they, for an adult who is completely and utterly unfamiliar with Are You Afraid of the Dark, I can guarantee you watch Things Heard and Seen, and then you watch an episode of this very low budget 90s Canadian kids TV show that I grew up with. I guarantee you will enjoy yourself more comprehensively watching the latter. You will.
Fair enough.
This is just really, really terror bad in every way, shape, or form.
We'll make that the CINEMENTALIST official rating. Terror bad.
We've discussed this many times, but when sometimes you might say, it depends. There are nuances in the spectrum. Sometimes things are stated somewhat hyperbolically, but when you really, really mean, I could not wait. I was impatiently waiting for this to end. And the more it went on, the more I felt a migraine teasing. This is one of those films.
Proper stay away jobby then.
So glad I only have to watch it once. Oh, Jesus Christ. So yeah, stay away from things heard and seen. Yeah, so it's a What Lies Beneath ripoff. What Lies Beneath wasn't fantastic, but it's a lot better than this shit.
There's some fun in there.
Yeah, and I actually think that the twist in What Lies Beneath is it did sort of come out, it came out of nowhere in a good way. It was a rather good conclusion, and there are actually some scares in What Lies Beneath, whereas there are none here whatsoever. So yeah, really poor, really poo.
Straight into the bin with that one then.
And then next up we have The Dry. Now, I believe this was actually scheduled for release in 2020, but it's another film that got a pushback. And this is an Aussie film starring Eric Bana.
No, I haven't seen him for a while. What has he been up to?
Just stuff, I guess.
Chilling out on the beach, mate.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I think of Eric Bana, I mean, he did Chopper, where I found his performance very enjoyable in that. And I think the 2002 Hulk, which I went to the cinema to see.
Yeah, that wasn't great. That was Ang Lee, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it wasn't terrific. But Eric Bana, I've liked Eric Bana in Hannah, the sort of crazy one with Saoirse Ronan.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
I believe, is it Tilda Swinton? Where it's kind of like the fairy tale spin on contract killing. Thought that was quite a nice, enjoyable bit of madness. But yeah, this is Eric Bana, like, in his homeland, playing a homebound Aussie. This is Federal Agent Aaron Falk. I'll stop doing the accent now.
I'm sure there's an Aussie podcast out there somewhere doing a British one. So we even out, don't worry.
Well, they probably match me in terribleness then.
Cool, blimey, governor. I'll off to see the Queen.
Yeah, I'm not claiming I can do one accurately. But Federal Agent Aaron Falk, he returns to his hometown of Kiwara. The film is shot in Victoria. I don't know if it's actually supposed to be set in a fictitious place in Victoria, but it's taking place in Victoria in Australia. And Aaron has come home for the funeral of his childhood best friend, Luke. Now, ever since they were knee-high until their sort of mid to late teens, Aaron and Luke were absolute. They were brothers from other mothers. They were, you can't see my fingers crossed, but they were like that.
Uh-huh.
They were inseparable, really, really good buds. And it transpires that Luke has recently shot his wife and son to death and then driven to a desolate field a few miles away and then blown his own brains out. So it's familial murder-suicide. And Aaron has not been in town for 2 decades, ever since he had to move away, because when they were teenagers, Aaron was accused of he was essentially not outright accused of murder, but the finger was pointed at him when a local girl that was part of his friendship group drowned in a creek near where they live. And him and his friend Luke said that they were together all day, but that was actually a mistruth, and they had suspicions cast on them, and they essentially accrued lifelong reputations as murderers, even though nothing was actually substantiated. And this is the first time Aaron has seen anyone since the 2 decades in which it happened. And as soon as he sets foot back in town, very suspicious eyes are cast upon him. There's a couple of familiar faces, such as his friend Gretchen, played by Genevieve O'Reilly, who's another friend going back to school days, who's quite pleased to see him. And Luke's parents are quite pleased to see him. But outside of that, everyone else is like, "You fucking murderer, fuck off, piss off, that's where you come from, you murdering bastard," all that sort of thing.
Uh-huh. Getting better with the accent.
Yeah, after the funeral, he goes and visits Luke's mum and dad, and they sit him down and they say, "Aaron, we don't believe Luke would have done this. He's never been perfect, but we do not believe that he would have killed his wife and his kid. He loved that for all his foibles. He loved that family too much. And we know this is not your jurisdiction, but we would really, really be grateful if you could help us by doing some extracurricular digging around before you go back to your main job. See if you can find something, anything that might cast some doubt on the official verdict of the police and all the other investigative teams in this case." And he's initially reluctant, but Luke's father's like, I know you two were lying about that stuff happened all them years ago with those girls' death. I know you two gave each other a false alibi. You were making shit up. It's like, I know you were bullshitting, not necessarily saying you were murderers, but you weren't being entirely forthcoming. So will you please just redeem yourself a bit and help us out? No, we're asking you to do some things that are not necessarily legal, but just morally, could you please do us this solid? And Aaron goes, okay, yeah, fine. And so he starts digging about, and he starts, as this is going on, he's reconnecting with certain people from his past, some in a sort of a poignant, wistful, reconnective way. Others, a lot of it is mired in outright hostility, naturally. And this investigation into Luke's alleged murder-suicide of his family runs parallel with flashbacks to he and Luke's mixing with Gretchen and Ellie, who is the aforementioned girl who mysteriously died all those years prior. And so it becomes a narrative where two mysteries unfurl at once in something of a character study-ish arena of Aaron. So yeah, it's a mystery drama. Now, Eric Bana's performance is very good. I really, really liked him as Aaron Falk. I thought that he actually brought a natural charisma to it, and he's a wounded man emotionally. He's a man who is haunted by his past and who is trying very, very, very hard to move on from that. And he kind of puts up with certain degrees of hostility as a penance, almost, without allowing himself to be, a complete and utter doormat. But he tries to be diplomatic. I think that Eric Bana emoted a lot of that without having to say much. I mean, it's not that it's a largely taciturn performance. Is that he does? I think he commutes that very well in his expressions and his body language. I thought he did a very solid job of that. There's a lot of very, very good uncomfortable drama in this film that I liked seeing. There were a lot of moments where I winced at the screen because of the way that certain hard truths coming to light were executed, and I'm always very grateful when a film can make me do that. That was very good. There's a lot of great cinematography in the film as well, because as I said, it was shot in Victoria, and the DP was Stefan Giusio, but there's a lot of shots of sort of adjacent dry land, like bush, like sort of bush forestry. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily outback, or I believe a mutual friend of ours who lived in Australia called it the whoop whoop. I think that's one.
Really?
Yes, that's like a Aussie vernacular for the outback.
That sounds like made up Aussie vernacular.
Yeah. One of
do you think they just do that for tourists?
They might do, yeah. But he was told one of the.
Tell them it's called Wallalabunga.
Yeah. Doodle roodle doodle dong. Yeah. Apparently, one of the Australian slang terms for the outback is the whoop whoop, but it's not. It's not whoop whoop, but it looks like, it's still, there's a lot of barren rural terrain that was shot very beautifully, I thought. The Dry does have a lot of good things going for it. The only thing I would say in terms of shortcomings is that I was very, very invested in the revelations as the parallel examination of the mysteries hurtled towards a conclusion. When the conclusions arrived, they just didn't feel like there was a lot of air in them. So initially, the focal twist in it initially comes across as quite disturbing and quite out of left field. And, superficially, there was a bit of but the more I thought about it, the more I thought that just feels, the more I think about it, the more that feels like a tacked on, really pulled out of your arse plot development, as opposed to oh man, it was there all along. How cleverly did they camouflage that? It's something that comes out of fucking nowhere, even though there is an initial shock factor to it. But then, with the subsequent rumination, the more I didn't feel sure about it at all. And the way that it wraps up the unanswered questions of Aaron's past from long ago, again, there was just a very unsatisfying, deflated feeling. So essentially, The Dry it's a very decent film for the majority of its running time, and then the ending just kind of knocks the wind out of it.
They're feeling that they didn't know what the ending was when they started writing it.
Yeah, the ending was essentially, it was a combination of maudlin and a bit silly.
That's an odd mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think, I mean, maybe if you see it for yourself, you might clock on to what I'm talking about if you do get around to it. But yeah, those are the two words that come to mind in terms of the climax when the credits start rolling. It's like, well, that was partially maudlin, with the connotations of being unsatisfying as well. It's like unsatisfyingly maudlin. And yeah, the major twist, it does smack of silliness, even though it initially comes out of left field and is a bit shocking. Further examination was just like, nah, there's just something about that doesn't work. I'm afraid it just didn't feel it didn't feel organic. It didn't feel like there was something. There was no sort of menace or ominous, unsettling vibe running through the film that set up that shocker in any way, shape, or form. That didn't feel like it was in the cells of the film. It just kind of comes out, and it's like, okay.
And then credits.
Yeah, and it's a shame because, as I said, Eric Bana's performance is good. It is good. Genevieve O'Reilly's performance is good. There's a lot of authentic drama there, where that I did feel as a vicarious transportation to this central character's life history and the demons that he's trying to sort of juggle with, and things that he's trying to do to redeem himself, and his interactions with a lot of other characters throughout the narrative. They are buyable, but if only the film just had a better constructed payoff, and just one that had a bit more imagination behind it, I think I'd find The Dry easier to rave about. But it was that ending that for me took it from moderately thumbs up film to okay. So yeah,
is it a recommendation overall? Is there's enjoyment to be had there?
I would say watch it for a strong Eric Bana performance and some really, really well executed scenes of tense drama, but brace yourself for an ending that, as far as I'm concerned, could have been done a lot better. But as always, you might watch the ending and think that there was, there's a profound bit of poignancy to it, and you do actually find there to be a legitimate emotional payoff, and that's all good. I just think that for what does have a good build up, a well constructed build up, with one of Eric Bana's probably best lead performances in anything, it deserved a stronger denouement. It really did. But things heard and seen fucking sucks. The dry. So
by comparison,
yeah, the dry doesn't suck. As in terms of, I know that they're very, very different films, but in terms of, is a film doing its job by making you forget about everything else for a couple of hours? The Dry, by many, many, many miles, does that more than Things Heard and Seen does. So, yeah, I'm sorry,
I think
guys.
I might check it out.
Yeah, this week has not been a grand week, but out of the two, there's one that is definitely worthier of your time. The first one, stay the fuck away from it tenfold. But watch The Dry, and if you completely disagree with me and you think that the points that I brought up in the negative, you think I'm talking out my arse and tell me what I'm looking past, with heartfelt sincerity, please tell me, because I want to know. I'm not saying that in a fucking disagree with me, yeah. No, I want to know, because if you can inform me of something you think that I'm having oversight on, I'm always very interested in hearing about it.
Excellent, yeah.
So The Dry, it's, for the most part, give it a watch.
Okay, then, that brings me on to TV of the week. 2 things to talk about.
And is one of them documentary related?
It's almost like we're following a pattern these days, isn't it? Yeah, I'll tell you what it is, actually. It's on a Friday night, me and my girlfriend, like a docuseries for some reason. That's sort of become a routine. Then as such, when we get to next Thursday and we record, that's the one that I put in the podcast, just to gain a little bit of extra content out of it, really. But yes, I do watch a lot of docuseries, and I've got a good one this week. But first, though, I have a fictional piece. This is entitled Debris. It's an American science fiction television series, and it premiered on March the 1st of this year on NBC, and I believe it's coming to Sky in the UK. Heard anything about this?
No, I haven't actually.
No, been a bit under the radar, this one. It's still running at the moment, actually. I've watched up to date, so I've watched the first 10 episodes, and I believe there are 13 in the season. Can't really get a clear answer on that, actually, but the Wikipedia page goes up to 13, but there's only been 10 released so far. And it is the most blessed of things, given the past 2 weeks I've had to review something where the setup is actually really, really simple.
Oh, good.
Which is it's like a drink of cool water on a summer's day. I'll tell you that much. Giri Haji was brilliant, but there were a lot of things I had to get right in sequence, and Shadow and Bone had a lot of fluff over the top of its plot through lines, whereas this is very straightforward indeed. So I'll just give you the setup, and it's very episodic, this as well. So there's a format that I will get to. But anyway, this opens with some title text that explains that a few months previously, an alien spaceship was tracked in orbit. I should point out it's set in the modern day. Alien spaceship was tracked in orbit and it broke up in the atmosphere and scattered itself across the planet in the form of, no prizes for guessing,
shit.
Debris.
Oh, no.
And we meet Brian Beneventi, played by Jonathan Tucker. He is a CIA operative. And we meet Finola Jones, played by Ryan Steele, and she is an MI6 operative. And their job is essentially to be Mulder and Scully. What they do is they go across the United States primarily. It's very odd that this is almost entirely set within the United States. And they make it very clear that this debris has landed all over the earth. There's a little bit of mention of that with like, the Russians have got this bit and so-and-so's got this bit. But it was all set in the United States with a few shots with Finola's family back home. But anyway, I digress. They have a military plane. They work together as part of a unilateral transatlantic group that are going around collecting these pieces of debris and analyzing them and trying to figure out their purpose, because every single bit of this spaceship that lands causes a different effect. And so some of them cause what seem to be sort of paranormal events. Some of them act like magnets. Some of them even allow people to jump through time. And nobody can quite figure out what all these different bits did on the original spaceship before it broke up. So it's their job to go around the States, finding these bits and pieces, be Mulder and Scully, work out the problem of the week, essentially, which is what this show devolves into. This episodic format where every week they find a new bit. It does something different. Some of them bend physics. Some of them trap people in foggy boxes. Some of them, it's that monster of the week format, except for paranormal-ish debris. And that's pretty much where I can leave it, to be honest. I told you where the setup was simple. It's these two people going around. And of course, there is an overarching plot thread where both the CIA and MI6 have got nefarious plans of their own. And so you've got that thing where, because they're both from different departments, despite the fact that they're partners working together, both of the organizations that they work for have different purposes and different intents with this debris and are sort of working against each other. So that creates some inter-character conflict.
What's the official name of that sound effect? You know, the dum dum dum.
Sure, yeah.
I just always thought, that's always appropriate for whenever there's a plot development like that.
There's also there's a British influence here as well. There's a character, Anson Ash, played by Scroobius Pip.
What, of Ganlasack and Scroobius Pip?
Scroobius Pip, yes. He's working for an organization that's attempting to steal pieces of debris. There's this shadowy organization within the world that is attempting to take as many pieces of this spaceship away from world governments as possible, because they believe that world governments will use it for their own nefarious purposes, whereas it should be more democratic. So a fair bit going on with the overarching plot lines as well, but it is essentially where are we going this week, and what is this weird bit of spaceship doing this time round? This is a weird one because I watched the first 5 episodes of this in one go. They're all about 45 minutes each. And I really wasn't buying it. And the thing I wasn't buying was that it reminded me very much, actually, of a phrase you use quite often on the podcast, and I love it because it's very descriptive. You often say, when you're reviewing something you don't like, that it didn't earn its ending.
Right.
And in those early initial episodes, this show doesn't earn its endings. It very quickly gets into this format of, although they're going to investigate a paranormal, physics-breaking bit of machinery that does a new bizarre thing each week, what they really want to do is immediately tie it into a personal drama story of a mother that's lost her child, or a father whose daughter went missing, or something like that. And they really want to amp up like the emotional drama of it. That's all well and good and fine. I can totally see why that works on paper and works in the writing room. When it starts doing it right from the get-go, though, before you've really got a chance to get a handle on the characters and the world that it's building, each time it builds up to that emotional peak, 40 minutes after the start of the episode, you kind of wish that they've focused more on the weird, bizarre, physics-breaking thing that week rather than the emotional drama. It's got the balance off on it.
So what are they like baiting and switching in a way that sucks?
A little, yeah, because you've got all these amazing sci-fi concepts, and that's what this is. Every week you get a new sci-fi concept because different bits of the ship do different things. And they're very well done. They're quite eerie and quite scary at points because there's quite literally physics breaking. You can have people float, you can have people turn into atoms, you can have people trapped in interdimensional portals, all this kind of stuff. And that's all done really, really well. It's quite chilling and the effects are good. And the characters, I mean, Brian Beneventi and Finola Jones initially are quite flat. I like Jonathan Tucker, and I think he does a good job, and I think he's actually giving the best performance in this show. But he is very much CIA operative, used to be a Marine in Afghanistan. They're trying to force feed some stuff about his shadowy past and things he had to do in the war. You got Finola Jones, who's got a sister who's a drug addict at home. But they're trying really hard to sort of, it feels like they're shoehorning those into these supernatural plots.
Does Jonathan Tucker do a lot of taciturnly staring into space?
Yeah, quite a bit of that. And I was getting annoyed with it because I was thinking you've got such a great concept here and it's really spooky at points and the atmosphere is right. And there's sort of a dry Tom Clancy-esque thing with these departments working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And they're only starting to realize what their employers are actually doing. And they start collaborating together and realizing that they're being fed false information and turned against each other. That's all there and that's all well and good, but the balance is off for those first 5 episodes. And I was getting quite annoyed with it and thinking what a wasted opportunity. And then I watched the other 5 episodes that are out at the moment. So this is episode 6 to 10. And all of a sudden it started to work. And I think the reason it started to work was because at that point you'd caught up as a viewer with the characterization of these people. And you actually cared now. When they got into a big emotional crying state because something terrible has happened and they feel connected to a person that's going through a terrible thing because of the horrible object that's fallen and caused this ridiculous supernatural situation, you now cared more, that had more weight because you got to know the characters. So it's front-loaded in all the wrong ways. It should have built up to that point rather than going with it from the get-go. And in the second half of the series, or at least the second half that's out at the moment, they focus much more on the objects themselves and the weirdness that's happening there and those overarching plot lines about nefarious behind-the-scenes dealing. That, in contrast to the earlier episodes, which are going for more personal, individual stories, works so much better. Episode 9 and 10, which are obviously the most recent ones I've seen, is sort of a 2-parter. And it involves time travel and interdimensional jumping and multiple reality theories. And I thought it was really, really well done. Really sharply written. The characterization is starting to come through. The performances are getting a lot better as well. There's these big plot threads that are now starting to pay off. And it's a late starter is what I really want to say about it, which makes it a difficult recommendation because you're going to have to, in order to know what's going on, if you want to watch this, you're going to have to sit through 5 episodes that actually I think have got the balance all wrong. But if you're prepared to get there, there's a good show underneath all of this. And it seems to be finding its feet. The good thing is it seems to be finding its feet halfway through the first season rather than right at the end of the first season. So there's potential here and I would like to see more of it. I just think it's a shaky, rocky start and that's a shame. But ultimately, I've got a feeling that it's going to pay off. It really does seem to be marching towards something bigger now that I'm very much enjoying. It is eerie, it is spooky, and the characters and the acting and the emotional stuff does settle down to a balance that's actually quite comfortable. So overall, it's a recommendation. But yeah, don't expect too much from it at the start, I think would be the fairest thing I could say about it.
Do episodes 9 and 10 have a lot of dialogue about quantum mechanics by any chance?
Yes. And there's quite a lot of perfunctory dialogue as well, where it's a lot of, well, if A is A and B is B, that must mean C, D, F, and X, Y, Z, and B. Yes, it must do. But what about H? Well, actually, with H, there would be R. Oh, okay, let's go over here now. and you sit there going, oh, okay, you could have
so inspiring.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of let's just get all the quantum mechanics and physics out the way because you don't really understand it. And to be honest, what we really want to get into is this guy that's lost his daughter this week. Yeah, there is a bit of a feeling of that about it.
What have we got written down here? Semi-accessible gobbledygook, I suppose that'll work.
Quite literally, yeah. But overall, it balances out into something that I think has got the potential to be quite special. It's blooming in front of us, this show. And I hope it gets its second season because if it continues on that trajectory, I think by season 2, this could be something quite special indeed.
Well, and it does, to be perfectly honest.
It's X-Files as well. It's Mulder and Scully, really.
Well, I actually like a lot of the X-Files.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
nothing wrong with that. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, well, your your nutshell is somewhat intriguing.
I'll let you know how it turns out. I might do a mini review of those last 3 episodes to see whether it runs the course, but I've got a feeling it will at this point.
Let's cross our fingers.
Okay, and the much promised and now much hyped docuseries this week. And I told you we'd have a callback to our 666th Twitter follower this week, because this is called The Sons of Sam.
Oh, I know about this. Yeah.
It suddenly occurred to me that this is our 65th podcast. How perfect would it be if it was the 66th instead?
It would line up nicely.
And we talk about what this docuseries is about, because for those that are unaware, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are aware of this actually because of the current obsession with true crime and true crime podcasts, but this is primarily about David Berkowitz, the titular son of Sam, who's also known as the 44 caliber killer. He was a serial killer operating in New York in the mid to late 70s, and walking around shooting people in their cars at night was his game, primarily using the same weapon, which is why, of course, he was labeled the 44 caliber killer. And he was eventually caught, and the police at the time said that he was their man. It was definitely him. He was the sole actor, the sole creator of these events. We've got him, we've locked him away, and that's the end of that. Go back about your lives, Denzians of New York. Everything is absolutely fine. Well, enter Maury Terry, who was an investigative journalist working at the time, who saw a bit more in the story than that. And this documentary opens up with the documentary crew were given a bunch of file folders that contained basically everything that Maury Terry had put together. He was a very obsessive investigative journalist, and he kept all of these files on everything that he'd uncovered. And he became obsessed with the idea that there wasn't just the son of Sam, they were the sons of Sam. He labeled himself the son of Sam in the letters that he wrote to newspapers and to the police department and the detectives that were chasing him. But he lived next door to a guy who was actually called Sam, who had sons. And so Maury Terry went about investigating these guys, first of all, going, well, what sort of link did it's called the Sons of Sam. There's a guy called Sam next to him who had sons. Does this unveil anything more? It seems weird that he might have acted alone. And as he fell down the rabbit hole, he discovered more and more vaguely occult dealings and groups of young people meeting up in New York, performing satanic rituals, animal sacrifice, drawing pentagrams in underground sewer tunnels and that sort of thing, and potentially working together with some of them performing some of these murders, and it all being labeled on David Berkowitz. Now, obviously, this sounds immediately like a completely and utterly spurious story. And to Maury Terry's dismay, when he started to put all these links together, and a lot of them were fairly credible, actually, that some of this did seem to really be true, he immediately got put on the same talk shows and radio shows and TV segments as people that were really, really into the whole satanic panic. Now, the satanic panic was in the late 70s and the 80s, in fact, all the way up to the 90s, really. It seems to have died off now. This idea that Satanism was all around us, and in a lot of popular media and culture, things like Dungeons and Dragons and children's cartoons and that sort of thing, there was a lot of hidden subliminal satanic messagery, which to a very, very Christian America at the time, this is why the satanic panic has now died down, is that Christianity seems to be waning somewhat, whereas back then it was still extremely strong. There was this real hype and fear about these satanic messages being everywhere and having a detrimental effect to young people, a detrimental effect to children. Whereas what Maury Terry was looking at actually had some substance and evidence behind it. And he was immediately sort of labeled a bit of a whack job and a bit of a kook. He managed to actually get an interview with David Berkowitz, where David Berkowitz did admit that he wasn't the only ones doing the killing. And there's a lot of discussion about whether Maury Terry perhaps led him a little bit with his questioning, whether he was just saying what he thought the TV cameras wanted him to say because it was getting him screen time, maybe getting him an easier time. He was basically discredited by a lot of people. What this documentary manages to uncover is that while Maury Terry was definitely over-obsessive, and by the end of his career, he'd definitely gone down the tinfoil hat avenue of thinking. He'd started to put links together where even his friends around him were going, oh, that's a bit spurious, Maury. Ultimately, he did manage to find a lot of evidence to support the idea that the son of Sam did not act alone, and it may well have been linked to several groups in the area that were performing for their own amusement rather than anything supernatural, their own satanic rituals and this sort of thing. And it was a surprising documentary. It's very eerie. It definitely plays up that whole chasing down a satanic mystery thing. It reminded me a lot, actually, of Angel Heart, which I know is one of your favorites.
Ooh. What, you mean like what, tonally or?
Yeah, definitely. That's where it's aiming for, and I think it's aiming square at Angel Heart as well, and probably because
I haven't watched it yet, but that sounds creepy as fuck.
Well, the nice thing that leads you down the garden path with it as well is you've got this narration from Maury Terry's own personal writings, his diaries, delivered by Paul Giamatti, and he very much gives it the hard-boiled film noir cop treatment. Well, so you've got this, so I went to meet these guys and I couldn't believe that there was this link over here. What could it all mean? Yeah, but it is actually taken from his genuine diaries and notes, which does add that detective chasing down something satanic and occult element to the whole thing. So yeah, it's a bit of a creepy watch, this one. Some of it is quite spurious. Some of it is surprisingly convincing. There's still this group, and they call themselves the Irregulars, funnily enough. Like there's Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah.
Kiddies. They call themselves the Pine Street Irregulars. Maury Terry actually managed to get a lot of cops and investigators and PIs and all that sort of thing on his side. They started to see his evidence and think, actually, you know what, this guy might be onto something. So they used to meet up down a bar every week and get drunk, smoke cigarettes, and lay out their theories on the table. And Maury Terry, unfortunately, died quite a few years ago now. Eventually, he lost a lot of weight. He had health troubles. Basically, it was one of those cases that he became so obsessed with that his health suffered. And that's what ultimately killed him. But this group of the Pine Street Irregulars still meet every week to put these pieces of evidence that he gained together because they do really believe that he's onto something. Whether he was or not is up to the documentary viewer to decide. It does leave it somewhat open, but he made enough connections that have proven out to be true that it makes his case really genuinely compelling. And I think if you're interested in this sort of true crime thing, which so many people are, and I know you are as well, this is a good one. This is a really good one.
Well, it's quite interesting that you bring it up because it was literally, I think it was a couple of days ago, where my dad was actually watching Sons of Sam, and he was telling me, he was like, you got to watch this, man. It's really interesting because like this guy is connecting some very troubling and very interesting dots, and to quote him verbatim, is like the problem is he got put on a lot of chat shows with nutters.
Yeah, that is entirely correct. Yeah,
so I saw some clip of a guy going like, "Yes, I am a witch" and stuff like that.
It saves a little reveal for the end as well, which will definitely make you scratch your head a little bit. It throws everything up in the air.
What, in a shiver up the spine sort of way, or
yeah.
I like it when that happens.
This guy was he was a proper serious journalist, and he did some really important work. And yes, by the end, his friends even started to say, look, you might be going a little bit too far with this now. You might be going down one of those boards you make with the pins and the string. Yeah. At this point, you may be linking off to things that you may have gone too far. You may have overexpanded.
The next door neighbours, there's actually compelling evidence that those next door neighbours were like fucking weirdos, isn't there?
Yeah. And then the show goes all into that as well. And that neo-noir detective thing that it adds to it, I must chase down this story with the voiceover, really lends it some weight and there's some entertainment value there. But it gives it a cool feel and this occult vibe and this. You sort of really root for this guy, even though you think he might be stretching a little bit too far. He really does seem to have uncovered something real.
And it's narrated by Paul Giamatti.
It is, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool piece of work. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think I will. I'm going to have to check this one out. Definitely.
So yes, well, that brings me on to trivia this week. I mean, what a great lineup this is. We have our 666th Twitter follower. And also I covered Sons of Sam, which is talking about Satanism and the occult and all that sort of thing. So obviously we have to do trivia.
Anyone would think we're trying to draw parallels with the Unholy One.
Well, this is the thing. I think both of us would agree on this one, that we are very respectful of religious beliefs and other cultures and that sort of thing, which means, of course, we must also be respectful of people that are into Satanism.
Yeah.
And Satanists. Yeah, it's only fair and it only makes sense. So why not have a discussion, or a little bit of trivia at the very least, about Satanism and the Satanic Panic?
Yeah, well, I mean, LaVeyan Satanism is actually a mentality I have a lot of truck with because it's basically just, it's essentially civil libertarianism with some like sort of fun hocus pocus wrapped around it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, very anti-violence, very pro-freedom. So.
Actually, that's exactly where I'm going to start.
Excellent.
So here we go. Most card-carrying Satanists do not worship Satan or any other form of the devil. They are actually atheists. The Church of Satan, founded in the mid-1960s, explains it this way on its website. Satan to us is a symbol of pride, liberty, and individualism, and it serves as an external metaphorical projection of our highest personal potential. We do not believe in Satan as a being or person. The Church of Satan puts the individual at the center of the universe, where High Priest Peter Gilmore describes as going from an atheist to an atheist. The Satanic Temple, which formed in recent years to fight a perceived intrusion of Christian values on American politics, says, "We do not promote a belief in a personal Satan. To embrace the name Satan is to embrace rational inquiry removed from supernaturalism and archaic tradition-based superstitions."
Yeah, it's basically, that's the thing. It is all, it's like rational selfishness, which is differentiated from the typical connotations of selfishness. It's about egoism and your freedom ending where another person's freedom begins.
Libertarianism,
which is all extremely reasonable. And people go, well, why did LaVey do all that sort of stuff with the imagery? And they say, because it's fun. Because it's fun. That's what
I don't know what it is. There's something funny about pissed off Christians. I do apologize if you're Christian, but there is, surely you will admit there is something funny about it. While Satanism may eschew holy sites, gods, and other tenets that are sacred to most religions, it places a high value on symbolism and art. The Satanic Temple has used symbols of Satan to draw attention to what it sees as the hypocrisy of Christian symbols on government property. For years, it petitioned to have a massive Baphomet statue, a goat-headed symbol of Satan, in the Oklahoma State Capitol, which was home to a Ten Commandments statue. This summer, Oklahoma State's Supreme Court ruled that the Ten Commandments statue had to be removed, and the Satanic Temple took its statue to Detroit. Now, the temple is petitioning to have Baphomet on display next to a planned Ten Commandments monument in Little Rock, Arkansas. After learning of plans to display a nativity scene to commemorate Christmas at Michigan's state capitol last year, the Satanic Temple placed what it called a snake-tivity scene on the Capitol grounds. The 3-foot-tall sculpture featured a snake wrapped around a cross with the message, "The greatest gift is knowledge."
Well, I remember watching like a few like Fox vids back in the day where they were, quintessentially and very typically up in arms about it, doing all this. Oh, the founding fathers founded the United States on Judeo-Christian principles. Well, number one, no, they didn't.
No, they didn't.
Number two, if you're going to have sort of government approval, sanctioned government and open and conspicuous government approval of any religious institution, then you need to do it for all of them. So
yes, it's only fair,
it's
right?
All of them or it's none of them. That is what the First Amendment is all about.
In 1986, author Phil Phillips published Turmoil in the Toy Box, a book detailing how Masters of the Universe and other popular cartoons of the era were endorsing pagan practices through coaxial cables. With Pastor Gary Greenwald, Phillips also shot a video that elaborated on his theories. The question is there a well-organized plot and insidious design right now to program and influence the minds of our children towards the occult and witchcraft, Greenwald asked. It was rhetorical, as the two explained that the Thundercats were inspired by heathen gods, that E.T. died and was resurrected again and could therefore be confused with Christian figures, and that there are things we need to look at concerning the Smurfs. Because the characters are blue with black lips, they were depictive of dead creatures. Collectively, Saturday morning cartoons would teach children to get into spells and witchcraft. The two concluded their video essay by pointing out that Rainbow Bright had a pentagram on her cheek.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, you want to talk about spurious, there you fucking go, right? This is the problem. Maury Terry got put on the same shows as these people, quite literally those guys that I mentioned.
And I swear to you, I promise you this is true. I actually know one or two LaVeyan Satanists, and they have kids. And you want to know how much they tell their kids about the kind of the ideology, if you want to call it that they follow? None of it. Not unlike a lot of Christian parents I know who inundate their kids with this shit all the fucking time.
That sort of pervasive doctrine doesn't really go with the free thinking aspect.
No, they're all about my children they're free agents. I want them to grow up believing, finding their own way, doing whatever they want, instead of dragging them off to a place of worship and telling them that they must believe X, Y, and Z. So,
In 1985, Procter & Gamble found itself in the unusual position of having to hold a press conference to deny that they were funding a satanic church. Since 1982, the company had been the target of anonymous accusations claiming their logo, a man in the moon surrounded by 13 stars, was secretly the mark of the devil. So many calls poured into the distributor of Ivory soap, Pampers diapers, and other household toiletries that they were forced to set up a toll-free number to refute allegations they were beholden to the Church of Satan. As for the stars, when the company was formed in 1882, they were intended to represent the original 13 colonies. The rumours ultimately prompted Procter & Gamble to remove the symbol from its packaging. Satanic diapers.
I mean, if that is true, I just love the trolling.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man, for fuck's sake.
How many people were doing it just to get on board for the fun of it? You know,
you actually find these people who go with sincerity. They go to like these conventions. There was one woman with a can of Monster, the energy drink, pointing at the design, going like, "This is meant to represent 666." And Monster, what does Monster connotate? You know, the demon, the dark lord. It's just like, love, seriously, get a fucking hobby, get a sane hobby that you can throw yourself into.
And my last one here. It wasn't solely popular culture of the 1980s that was being examined for traces of occult worship. In 1986, two evangelists from Ohio, Jim Brown and Greg Hudson, claimed that they had excavated a hidden message in the unlikeliest of sources, the theme song from Mr. Ed. The 1960s sitcom about a talking horse opened with the title song, A Horse is a Horse. Played backward, the preachers insisted, one could hear sinister undertones like, the source is Satan, and someone heard this song for Satan. The discovery was mentioned during a seminar for teenagers on the moral evaporation caused by rock music. The teens then burned 300 popular albums in a pyre. Despite the discovery, Brown said he didn't think the producers of Mr. Ed were actual Satanists. We don't think they did it on purpose, he said.
He lives in the shed, he is a horse, he's Ed, of course.
And he's Satan incarnate, apparently. Yeah.
Oh, man, a devil-worshipping horse.
Now, that's a show I'd watch. I'd review that on the podcast.
That is hilarious. What is up with all these humorless motherfuckers?
We don't think they did it on purpose. It's accidental Satanism. Yeah. Surely, so they made a theme song, right? And they play it backwards and they go, oh, there's a message in it, but we don't think they did it on purpose. Well, then there's no argument then, is there?
What's the...
nobody accidentally creates a portal to hell. You know?
What is the Zepp song where they say it's right backwards?
A Stairway to Heaven, supposedly.
Is that the one where you can allegedly hear Robert Plant going, sweet Satan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Satan is life or something like that. And there was the famous Judas Priest thing as well, where Rob Halford from Judas Priest famously said that if we were going to put subliminal messages in our songs, they'd be buy more of our records.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be worship Satan.
Well, it's like Bill Hicks. I am fucking sick of it. I am fucking sick of it.
You know what I really want? To go back and work in a shoe shop.
Sick of touring. I'm sick of making $400,000 a night. Why don't we kill the fucking audience?
Anyway, enough of this silliness. We must go on to our premium podcast this week. Thank you so much for listening to the free one. If you'd like to check out our premium content, please do check out cinementalist.com for a link to our Patreon page, or Google Cinementalist. That'll be one of the first results that comes up. You can follow us on Twitter at Cinementalcast. You can follow Liam at...
I'm Liam at the movies at Wacko Jacko's Flicks.
I should probably say what we're actually doing on the premium podcast this week. That is the whole point of doing this little run-up, isn't it? Liam's got a couple of extra takes for you. What are you doing this week?
Well, I thought I'd have a little revisit of Breakdown, which is one of me and my brother's childhood favourites, with Kurt Russell in a sort of an against-type performance. And then going to have a look at both versions of The Gambler, because most recent one written by William Monahan with Marky Mark 2014, which was obviously inspired by the 1974 film written by James Kovacs starring James Caan. And then after that, we're going to go into a little bit of a chat about several James Caan numbers.
Yeah, we're going to use this as an excuse to talk about James Caan for a bit, because why not?
I was happy when you suggested that.
Yeah, it was one of your favourites, right? So yeah, if you'd like to listen to us waffling on about James Caan and picking out some of our favourites, and I've got some James Caan quotes as well.
Excellent.
Please do check out our premium content. If not, we will see you for the free podcast next week, of course. Anything to add, Liam?
As always, people, thank you very much indeed. I hope you enjoy the content. Hope everyone's staying safe out there. I think we're sort of coming towards the end of things now in terms of this horrifying pandemic. Well, I know that it's on the horizon in the UK. I can't speak globally. I don't know how good our American friends.
It seems to be the vaccine thing seems to be working in quite a few countries anyway.
Yeah, hopefully by the end of 2021, it will be like 2022 is just going to
be back in the cinema again.
Normal shit. Yeah,
absolutely.
He's hoping.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, hope to see you guys in the premium. If not, free one next week. Take it easy, guys.